The rain came down in sheets over the Wagner's Grove Walmart parking lot, hammering the roof of a rusted 2004 Honda Civic where Odalis Bramlett sat with her, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. In the back seat, her two children, 6-year-old Marisol and 4-year-old Tobias, were curled beneath a single moving blanket, their breath fogging the cold glass. It was the 11th night. Odalis had stopped counting the days since the eviction notice, but she counted the nights. 11 nights of parking in different lots. 11 nights of telling her children this was an adventure. 11 nights of praying nobody would knock on the window and ask her to leave, the only shelter she had left. She hadn't always been here. 6 months earlier, Odalis had a 2-bedroom apartment on Larchmere Street, a job at a dental office, and a husband named Desmond who told her he needed space to figure things out. The space turned into a motel room 3 towns over, and then it turned into nothing at all. No calls, no child support, no forwarding address. The dental office closed after the owner retired, and after that, everything folded like a house built out of cards in a windstorm. Odalis had applied to 11 jobs in 3 weeks. She had eaten crackers for dinner so her children could have the sandwich. She had learned which gas station, bathrooms let you wash a toddler's hair in the sink without asking questions. That night, a knock came on the window, soft, almost apologetic. Odalis jolted upright, her hand instinctively reaching back to touch Marisol's leg, a habit she'd developed to reassure herself her daughter was still there, still safe. Standing outside in the rain was a tall man in a canvas jacket, holding an umbrella over a stroller with one hand and knocking with the other. He had a face that looked like it had seen its own share of hard winters, deep-set eyes, a jaw that hadn't been shaved in a few days, and an expression that held no judgment at all. "Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you," he said, his voice raised just enough to be heard over the rain. "I saw your dome light on. I just wanted to make sure you and your kids were okay." Odalis rolled the window down 2 inches, just enough to speak. Her guard still up from months of learning that kindness sometimes came with strings attached. "We're fine," she said, "just resting for the night." The man glanced at the fogged-up back windows, at the small shapes curled beneath the blanket, and something in his face softened even further. "My name's Jericho Van Trees," he said. "I've got a boy of my own, 16 months old, right here. His mother passed 8 months back. I know what it's like to be doing this whole thing alone, staring at a parking lot wondering how you're going to make tomorrow work." Odalis felt her throat tighten, the kind of tightness that came from being seen when you'd spent months trying to be invisible. She didn't answer right away. Jericho didn't push. He simply stood there in the rain, holding his umbrella slightly toward her, window as if trying to shelter a stranger from a storm he couldn't fully stop. "There's a diner 2 blocks from here, Millard's. It's open all night," he finally said. "I was headed there myself. Free coffee for anybody who looks like they haven't slept right in a while. No charity, no strings. Just coffee and maybe some eggs for the kids if they're hungry." Odalis almost said no. She had said no to enough offers that had turned out to be nothing, or worse, had turned out to be pity dressed up as friendliness. But Tobias stirred in the back seat and murmured, "Mama, I'm hungry," in the smallest voice, and something inside her cracked open. 20 minutes later, they sat in a booth at Millard's, the vinyl seat sticky with age, the smell of bacon grease and burnt coffee thick in the air. Jericho ordered eggs and toast for Marisol and Tobias without asking, and pancakes with extra syrup, the kind of order that made Tobias's eyes go wide with a joy Odalis hadn't seen in weeks. Jericho's son, a round-cheeked baby named Silas, gurgled happily in his stroller between them. "I'm not doing this because I think you need saving," Jericho said quietly, once the kids were distracted with syrup and paper napkin airplanes. "I'm doing this because 8 months ago, a woman I'd never met bought me a tank of gas when I was sitting in a gas station parking lot with Silas, crying because my card got declined. She didn't ask questions. She just said, 'Nobody should go through this alone,' and drove off before I could even get her name." Odalis wrapped her hands around the warm coffee cup, feeling the heat seep into fingers that had been cold for 11 nights straight.
"I used to have a life," she said,
the words spilling out before she could stop them. "A real one. An apartment, a job, a husband who I thought loved me. I don't know how you go from that to this. I don't know how anybody explains it to their kids." Jericho nodded slowly. "You don't explain it," he said. "You survive it. And then one day, You look back and you realize surviving it was the explanation. They talked until nearly 2 in the morning. About the shelters that had year-long wait lists. About the daycare voucher program most people didn't know existed. About a woman named Cassandra Okonkwo who ran a nonprofit out of a converted church basement that helped mothers get back on their feet with actual apartments, not just temporary beds. Jericho wrote the address down on a napkin with a pen that barely worked, pressing hard enough to leave grooves in the paper. 3 weeks later, Odalis stood in the doorway of a small one-bedroom apartment above a hardware store on Ferris Avenue, a place Cassandra's organization had helped her secure through an emergency housing fund. It wasn't much. The radiator clanked at night and the bathroom tile was cracked, but it had a lock on the door and beds for her children that weren't the back seat of a Honda Civic. Marisol had already claimed the window seat as her reading spot. Tobias was running in circles just because he could. Jericho stopped by that weekend, Silas on his hip, holding a box of second-hand kitchen supplies someone from his church had donated. He didn't come inside long. He wasn't trying to become anyone's rescuer, and Odalis wasn't looking to be rescued. But as he stood in the doorway, watching Tobias chase his own shadow across the living room floor, he said something Odalis would remember for the rest of her life. "You didn't need me to change everything," he said. "You just needed someone to knock on the window and remind you that you weren't as alone as it felt." Odalis never married Jericho, and their friendship never became anything more than exactly what it needed to be. Two people who understood a particular kind of exhaustion, checking in on each other every few weeks over coffee that was no longer free but was still somehow the best either of them had ever tasted. Odalis eventually got a job managing the front desk at Cassandra's nonprofit, greeting mothers who pulled into the parking lot the same way she once had, engines running, headlights off, uncertain if they belonged there. And sometimes late at night, when a car sat too long in that lot with its dome light glowing faintly through the rain, Odalis would grab her umbrella, walk out into the dark, and knock softly on the window, because she had learned that the smallest act of being seen could be the difference between a person disappearing and a person finding their way back.